Greetings and welcome to Legacies of Wavryn, Lore of the Endelment. This will be chapter 22 of this reading. It was nighttime when we arrived in Chicago, with at least 100 other tricked out vehicles lined up and down both North Canal Street and West Fulton Street, each car facing into the streets. However, there were 9 other vehicles that were just randomly parked in the crossroad where the actual starting line was. One of which, I noticed, was Yojen's car. As we strolled up, Bunny, Amber, and Jewel glanced at everyone around us, seeing them staring back as they gossiped to one another. The scenery was kind of funny to me, especially since it looked a lot like what you'd see on Cormor X. Just about everyone that was a spectator had their car doors, hoods, and trunks open to show off their rides. Some had loud rap or heavy metal music playing, while others used their hydraulics to dance their cars. Even more were dancing themselves. There were also a few people standing or sitting on some of their cars, as if to look cool or sexy. This was actually the one time that I thought that humans were no different from my own people back in Wavryn. I felt right at home. I drove past a few of the other racers and parked next to the right side of Yojen's car in the center of the crossroad. Serena casually opened up her side door and looked back at my friend, who was sitting on the hood of his car watching my wife cautiously. When Serena looked back to see Yojen watching, she smiled and pulled the door back towards her as to close it. However, she quickly kicked her door open to have it swing out and miss his car by inches. My friend jumped up and turned to my wife as he tightened his fists, spooked that she might have scratched his car. After Serena casually got out of my car, Yojen pointed his right finger at her and said, "Bitch, you lucky that you're married to White Boy. Otherwise, I'd have beaten your ass right here and now, regardless if you scratched my ride or not." "Whatever," she said, "you 2-inch dick dumbass." She then turned around and moved her seat forward to let the other 3 out. Yojen turned to sit back down on his car as he crossed his arms over his chest and said, "Punk ass bitch. You don't know me." Serena walked around the front of my car to sit on the right side of the hood, while flipping my friend off with her left finger. When she sat down, she lowered her hand and just watched what everyone else was doing, while Amber closed the passenger door and leaned against it next to Jewel's left side. Bunny hopped out after I did, motioning to hold my right arm and stand at my side once I closed the door. 2 guys in the race I found were very dark-skinned and looked to be in their late 30s. Both wore all black clothes, pants, shoes, t-shirt, and thin glasses, which I thought was odd. They both had what looked like very powerful muscle cars, same kind, just one was the older model, and the other was the newer model. Both of the muscle cars were painted gloss black, and both had 20-inch rims, also painted gloss black. However, the older model had a large blower on its engine that cut through the hood. I also noticed that Algan was here as well, driving a supercar of his own. It was painted matte black, with a thin extra spoiler on the back, an add-on of the first stock-made spoiler, reaching out a little bit from the sides and back. He painted it to look like some dumbass Black Panther, with sharp pieces of metal that were welded and painted to look like fangs in the grille. Painted paws around the frame of the tires and painted claws on the rims, with neon green bulbs in the headlights and a black, thin dilated pupil for cat eyes. He also had a funny looking black vinyl tail that had a thin white outline around it, coming from the back window down to where the license plate should have been. About 5 minutes after I got settled in, having seen everything there is around me, Matthew began handing out GPS trackers to all the racers. It was to help us navigate through the course of the race and allow us to communicate with the other drivers. Not sure why we needed that, especially for Yojen and me. We could have done this race without even a single track marker. Plus, why would we need to communicate with everyone else? Moronic human. Bunny finally noticed Matthew walking over to give me a GPS tracker, Then when I went to hook it up to my car's dashboard and into the system, she asked, "When's the race gonna start?" The human looked around to get an overview of the racers, with his laptop open in his left hand as he typed with his right and replied, "Once my friends gives me the heads up that all the cops in the area are gonna be occupied, we'll begin." Just then, Matthew's cell phone went off and he quickly reached into his right front pocket to answer it. After a second, he put his phone away, then looked over at Bunny and said, "Like right now." He closed his laptop and held it under his right arm as he turned to everyone in the crossroad and yelled, "Line up everyone, let's go! The race is about to start." The racers jumped into their cars and lined up at the crosswalk on West Fulton Street, with Matthew positioning himself in front of us in order to signal the beginning of the race. Serena, Bunny, Amber, and Jewel walked over to the front left of the race line to watch us start from the sidewalk, with Jewel acting very nervous for some reason. I lined up in the front row with Algan to my left side and Yojin to my right. Confusing in my perspective, Jewel ran up to my passenger side window and lightly tapped on it. I rolled it down to let her speak, with her slightly frightened as she said, "My lord, please don't do this. I got a bad feeling." I smiled and said, "Don't worry. That just means the fun's about to start. Trust me, Serena's always like that when she's at a really good race with me." "That doesn't make it sound like a good thing, my lord." "Jewel," I said as I raised my left hand at her, "you don't need to call me my lord every time you speak to me, okay? Besides, what happened to Ray?" As I lowered my hand, Jewel said, okay, She paused herself for 2 seconds, then smiled and said, "Okay then. Don't worry, nothing is going to happen, okay?" Just then, someone in the back of the lineup yelled out, "You're gonna get smoked, punk!" After that, a loud engine rev came, and the other racers began revving their engines for a bit. Ignoring the others around her, Jewel looked down as she nodded her head slightly, then said, "Alright." She then turned back to stand in between Bunny and Amber and turned to watch the racers. I rolled up my passenger window and quietly said to myself, "Not to me anyways." We watched as Matthew put his laptop to the side, then pulled out a road flare from his left pocket and set it off. He raised it over his head with his left hand while he yelled, "Once this flare hits the ground, you go. Got it?" In response, all the racers just revved their engines at Matthew. I loved that sound. It gave me goosebumps. After everyone revved their engines, Matthew pulled his left hand down to add leverage to his throw with the flare, tossing it straight up. He then quickly ran to the left onto the sidewalk to move out of the way. Just as the flare was thrown, Yojin hung his head out his window as he banged his left fist on the outside of his door and yelled at me, "I'ma smoke you, fool!" He then put his head back into his car to face out his front window while putting his left hand on the steering wheel as he revved his engine a couple more times. I chuckled as I turned my GPS on, and I calmly said, "You'll have to keep up then." As the flare hit the ground, Matthew uselessly shouted, "Go!" Instantly and simultaneously, every racer peeled off the line. However, once everyone peeled off, one racer only moved a foot forward and blew up. The explosion started at the engine in the back, then another hit the front, engulfing the entire car in flames. It probably blew up because it might have had nitrous oxide tanks installed and used improperly. Another chickened out after seeing that car blow up, backing out of the race and heading down North Canal Street to go home. Yojin and the guy in the older muscle car did a high wheelie and were able to bolt from the line faster than everyone else, getting them a good distance ahead of everybody before their cars stabled out. Yojin and the other muscle car fought between first and second. I took third by myself. Algan and the newer muscle car fought between fourth and fifth, and the other three racers in the far back fought amongst themselves. When the supercar from before had exploded, Yojin yelled through the GPS, Haha, now that's what I call an explosive takeoff. My friend and the driver in the older muscle car held their wheelies for about 5 seconds, then both leveled out and stabilized as their front tires touched ground. Algan swung around from behind me and quickly ran up behind the newer muscle car, where he said, "I'm coming for you, jerk. Time for some payback from last week." "Ooh, I'm so scared," the guy said, uncaring. Algan gave him a quick ram, which the guy replied with, "Damn, nigga, you crazy." When we came up on the first turn, I tried to push for the inside by slightly going around the left of Yojin. But as I pulled up, he quickly swung over to block me and yelled, "You ain't passing me, white boy." With that, I just swung over to his right to have him block me again, only to throw him off. I then swung back to drift around the inside of the first turn, while Yojin swung through in the center with the older muscle car, and everyone else taking the outer side. Yojin pulled ahead of me because I swung too hard into my drift and lost some speed. Then as we all ended the turn, he said, "Nice try, sucker." "Remember, chocolate chip," I said, "I never lose, not even to you." "What was that? I couldn't hear you over the..." Yojin's car made a loud bang as fire started to blow out his tailpipe. He accelerated a bit more and just laughed out loud, trying to pull away. I just shook my head and said, "Not gonna work, fool." Just then, I simply shifted gears and started to catch up on my friend, moving away from the others. A quarter of the way down the second street, we saw cross traffic. I heard one of the other driver's tires squeal, which I glanced back in my rearview mirror to see the person pull a 180-degree turn, dropping out of the race. The rest of us went for it and insanely maneuvered through the traffic, where I almost lost control of my car because I miscalculated and scraped the right side of it against someone. However, some other racer got struck in the back left of their car, spun around, and was T-boned in the driver's side by an 18-wheeler. I figured the person was dead with how hard of an impact that crash was. Once I straightened myself out from my contact, Yojin laughed again, then asked, "What's wrong, white boy? Can't even handle your own ride?" Just then, the guy in the older muscle car swung over and hit the right side of my friend, which Yojin replied with, "Fuck you, punk. I'ma whoop your ass." He struck back at the muscle car hard, causing the driver to lose slight control. Then Yojin said, "Don't start shit you can't finish, po' boy." We took the next turn nearly at 80 miles an hour, only because we all nearly forgot where the turn was and realized it at the last second. When we started down West Madison Street, we had slightly changed positions. Yojin was still in first, with me less than 10 feet behind him. Algan was swapping paint for third place with the older muscle car, while one of the human drivers took fourth. The racer kept his spot by blocking the newer model muscle car from getting past, swerving nearly all over the road and just barely missing the light traffic that we had to go through. As he swerved around, the human said, "Come on, SA. That low-grade piece of shit's gotta get better than this if you want to get past me." The newer muscle car backed away from the human and just drafted behind him. Then the racer said, "That's right, Holmes. West Side rules." By the time we took the left onto West Madison Street, I started pulling up to my friend, then lightly rammed the back of his car for fun. Just as I did, he yelled, "I told you, white boy, you ain't passing me." The U-turn we were coming up on had roadblocks at the streetlights to let us make the turn without any traffic interference. In the center of the crossroad was a large metal trash can that stood up, with 3 inches of red paint around the top rim of it and a bright red flare inside. The flare was lit by some random person I saw that quickly tossed it into the can, then ran off behind the left side barricade. Just as we went across the overpass of the freeway, I said, "Let me give you one of life's lessons, my friend." When we went to take the turn, I swung to drift on the outer right side, taking it at about 60 mph. Yojin had to slow down quite a bit for how his car was, but still took the U-turn fast on the inside. Once I had pulled out of the turn, I had passed my friend with about half a car length away from him when I said, "All around performance outclasses pure power any day." Yojin just barked, "Shit." The older muscle car swung over in front of Yojin and tried to hit him head on, but Algen's quick thinking pushed the muscle car out of the way, while he narrowly avoided hitting my friend himself. When I saw that, I finally realized that something was up with those two muscle cars. They were after something. As Yojin moved to swerve away from Algen, he yelled, "Watch it, psycho!" I motioned to take the off-ramp to get onto the freeway, which had heavy traffic on both sides from that crappy construction. The last human racer went for the U-turn, as he said, "This race is over for USA." The older muscle car swung around the turn from the left side. Then when the two muscle cars passed each other, the driver in the older model said, "End it." "Yes, my lord," the other replied. The newer muscle car accelerated and hit the back of the racer's car that was ahead of him, making it spin out of control just as he was trying to take the U-turn. The human's car swung 90 degrees to the left and pivoted too much, flipping over and forcing it to barrel roll past the roadblocks and down the street. On the fifth flip, the car slammed onto its top and caught fire. Not long after did the nitrous tanks overheat and exploded from the center of the vehicle, turning the entire car into an inferno. The driver in the newer muscle car swung around the U-turn as he yelled, "That's right, nigga. East Side rules." That was when I knew. These guys weren't just some random street racers. They were Kexons. Seeing that Algen's after them, and they were after Yojin, they were working for Father, which meant Yojin knew something that they wanted to keep secret. I looked into my rearview mirror and saw Yojin just barely escape being T-boned from the older muscle car, causing it to have to make an immediate U-turn to head down the freeway, since the other ramps were completely closed off. Unfortunately, the newer muscle car swung around the turn to head down the off-ramp after my friend. However, it was stuck behind Algen, who was purposely slowing down to let Yojin get ahead. Just as we got onto the freeway, Yojin and I swung to the far right to barely avoid an 18-wheeler heading towards us. Algen in the newer muscle car just squeezed by in the breakdown lane and barely avoided the tanker as well. Yojin and I avoided two more cars, and the older muscle car quickly pulled up behind his friend, while Algen moved into the center lane and avoided traffic as he kept up with us. While we continued to avoid traffic, as traffic was trying to avoid us, I asked, "What did you do, Yojin?" "What do you mean, fool?" "Those two in the black muscle cars. I suspect that they're working for Father. What do they want from you?" "They want him dead," Algen calmly replied. "Yojin is one of the few people suspected of being the Endelment. If he were able to get his hands on either Rakar or Rokar, Yojin could overthrow your father and take control of his empire. Unfortunately, that's all I know." "Eat this, suckers!" Yojin barked, swerving over towards the two Kexons. "Yojin, stop!" Algen moved to block my friend from crossing the road to reach the two Kexons. They then held each other halfway into the center lane as they pushed against one another, while Algen said, "You can't face them on your own." "Fuck off, Buster." A city bus came driving down the center lane, honking its horn. Before they could collide, Yojin and Algen swerved away from each other and missed the bus by a few feet, only to swerve back in after it passed. They hit against each other again, with Yojin pushing Algen a little more over towards the Kexons. While we came up to the ramp for the Eisenhower Expressway, Yojin quickly swerved away from Algen. He then slowed down a bit and immediately swerved back to do a pit maneuver. Algen spun out and got T-boned on the driver's side of his car by a large pickup truck, where his car blew up, taking the truck with him. With that, I could sense that the Kexan's life energy was gone. At this point, there was no race to me. What my friend did was uncalled for. I didn't want to best Yojin in speed. I wanted to stop him from taking this thing too far. He headed off and I swerved over to follow, just barely missing the railing and cutting off the two muscle cars from moving in. When we came to the last turn, I slammed on the accelerator in anger and charged for Yojin, while I quickly yelled, "Worthless piece of shit." With that, I moved my car to slide into the left side of Yojin's, nearly pinning him up against a parked car. Continuing down the last stretch of road, with the two Kexans about 2 car lengths behind us, I tried to push Yojin off the road as he pushed against me and yelled, "White boy, give it up. It's over." "It's not over. Not until I make you pay, peasant. I've won this race, and soon I'ma win this fight." "Is that all you care about? This fucking street race with your worthless scrap metal of a car? Is that it?" Yojin quieted down and angrily said, "I'll show you, worthless." He reached his right hand to flip a switch on his dashboard, bouncing the left side of his car's shocks up to push me away. When his car landed back down, he swerved towards me and slammed me into one of the parked cars along the left side of the road a quarter of the way down from the finish. I collided into the front end of the first car and flipped over 2 others. Then my car landed on its trunk on the front end of the fourth. My car fell forward and hit the pavement with just the front half of the frame, causing the main engine to sputter from having its own parts inappropriately collide. Though my car was made of stronger material to those I smashed into, the crash totaled my car from busting itself up and instantly shut down the engine as the front end settled on the pavement. Along with that, as I hit the first car, my head slammed into the steering wheel, then it was jerked back to break the head brace of my seat as I was tossed into the air. Once my car fell forward from the landing, I fell forward and my head smashed onto the steering wheel again, then bounced back and hit the backside of my driver window with my head. The window shattered on impact and had a few pieces sliced into the back right side of my skull. With my head banging, I ended up getting a concussion, yet still struggled to look up out my front window to watch Yojin continue speeding down the roadway and past the finish line. As he sped by, so did the 2 muscle cars as one followed at his back left and the other at his back right. Watching this, I could see someone from out the corner of my eyes running over and calling out to me. Then when they came around, I not only saw Yojin pass the finish line, but the older muscle car did a pit maneuver on the right side of my friend's car. When the first Kexan did that, it threw Yojin's car in front of the second, who T-boned my friend on the passenger side of the car, nearly ripping through it. The newer muscle car was able to continue to push Yojin until they got over the crossroad train tracks. Then it stopped as the engine broke down. I noticed that the Kexans were trying to push Yojin into a setup of an 18-wheeler that had a gas trailer on it, which was turned over onto its side across the road. The Kexan in the older muscle car just sped past his partner, then swung a 180-degree turn to stop just in front of the tanker. With that, the driver stared down my friend and revved the engine every so often. I assumed the Kexan was waiting to make sure if Yojin was somehow dead or not, though that was kind of stupid to think about. One of the people who came to my help was Bunny, who ran up to the driver's side of my car and tried to open the door. However, it was jammed from my contact with Yojin. She then leaned down and in a panic asked, "Papa, what happened?" I tried to tell her to go help my friend, but with my head trauma, I was in a little too much pain to speak. Without my answer, Bunny said, "Don't worry, Papa. We're gonna get you out of there." Serena, Amber, and Jewel ran up and looked down into my car to see what had happened, while my wife said, "Shit, he's hurt bad. That's a shocker, Amber said. Serena ran around to help Bunny grab the driver door and rip it open from it being jammed against the frame. Then they gently pulled me out to try and stand me up. Jewel grabbed a wet cloth from someone nearby and wiped the blood away from my forehead, my right wolf ear, and right eye. Matthew ran over and asked, "Dude, what the fuck happened? And where are all the other racers?" I recovered from my concussion and reached for the back of my head with my right hand, plucking out 3 shards of glass. Then I flicked them away, as I said, "Don't worry about it, dude. Just go home and lay low, okay?" "Like hell I will." He then spun around to run towards Yojin's car, probably to ask more stupid questions. My body quickly recovered, and I took off after the human, with Bunny following. Serena and Jules stayed to help out the people that had their car smashed from my crash, while Amber tried to get my car out of the way, as to fix it later. When I got over to the newer muscle car, I noticed that the driver had his head broken over the steering wheel, with his blood and brain matter nearly all over the driver's side. It was apparent that this man was human, driving a boulder and metal built vehicle, which I didn't understand why. As I ran over to the driver's side of Yojin's car, Matthew took off to the older muscle car with the actual Kexon in it. At the broken out driver's side window, our friend looked up at me and said, "Sorry, Ray." He coughed up a handful of blood onto his steering wheel, then continued, "Got way too serious." "Forget it," I said. I then looked over at Bunny to see her staring into the car, both of her hands covering her mouth, as she was horrified at the scene. I looked back as my friend gave a quick reflex of pain, then looked around to see what had happened. The only thing that was really bad about the crash was the inside. I saw that there were 2 large nitrous oxide tanks that were supposed to be strapped to the passenger side of the vehicle, but had broken away and jammed themselves into the right side of its torso. Also, a roll cage bar broke away from its spot from the roof and had stabbed into Yojin's upper back, along with a second having stabbed through both of his legs and a third into his back's left side. After I had glanced around, Serena called out, "Ray!" Surprised, I quickly looked up towards her just as I heard a freight train blow its horn. Then she yelled, "Get him off the tracks!" I heard the train once again to notice that it was coming closer, while the crossing guards came down and the warning bell rang. However, I knew I couldn't get Yojin out with how he was. Serena jolted over in a panic and said, "Get him out. Get him off these tracks. The impact of the freight train will cause those tanks in both his car and the others to explode." "He can't," Bunny said. "He's been nailed in." "Shit," Serena barked, punching the side of the newer muscle car with her right hand. As the train blew its horn again, I heard a gunshot go off in the distance. I turned around to look at the older muscle car, only to see Matthew hit the ground and lay limp next to the driver's side. The Kexon in the muscle car dropped a pistol and moved his hand back inside, while giving his engine one last loud rev before motioning to heat his tires. I quickly looked over my left shoulder at my daughter and said, "Bunny, you and Serena need to get out of here." "But Papa, now." The train blew its horn again, and the Kexon peeled off to head towards Yojin and me. Just as they took off, I heard the Kexon on Yojin's battered GPS say, "Forever, Dominic Halen Shero." Then, halfway down the road, he yelled, "Forever thy empire." As the Kexon came closer, I glanced over to my right shoulder to see the train coming as well, with a glimpse of Serena getting help from Amber and Jewel to pull Bunny away from the scene. When I looked back, I straightened myself up with confidence and waited for the Kexon to reach me. Bunny kept screaming at me to move, but I just ignored her. Only because I knew one little fact that this dumbass forgot. All I needed was one little cell. "I'll give you one free shot when you wake up, Yojin," I said as the 2 vehicles drew closer. Yojin coughed again, then said, "You crazy fool." Just as the Kexon's car reached me, I quickly pulled my right fist back, hitting Yojin's head with my right elbow, and I punched down into the front end of the muscle car. Oddly enough, the car the Kexon was driving was an Earth-based car, which I was able to damage and put my fist through the engine. While punching into the car, I yelled, "Fuck your empire." When the back end of the muscle car swung up, the Kexon driving it did some fast thinking and kicked out the roof, then flew out and away from the scene. I pulled my right hand away from the car and reached into my coat to pull out Rek'Har, then looked over to my right to see the train just coming around the turn to pass through the rail crossover. I smiled and said, "Nice try." With that, I tossed Rek'Har over my left hand, scraped the top part of the hilt onto my right elbow, then flipped it around to cut my forehead with the bottom of it. I threw the hilt up and out of the crossover from where the Kexon charged us, keeping it clear from what might happen. Bunny screamed for me one last time to move, but the train collided with us and caused all of the wrecked cars to explode, destroying both Yojin's body and mine on the track. Thankfully for my thinking, when our old bodies were destroyed in the explosion, they quickly yet painfully restored next to the hilt that I threw, along with what we were wearing. Within 5 seconds, Yojin and I were back to normal, and the entire train was somehow engulfed in flames, with the cars simply melting into the ground from the intense heat. It was a stupid thing to do, use only a very small bit of our bodies to rejuvenate, but it was a last resort. Who wouldn't? After all, even if most of the time we hated each other, Yojin was still my best friend. Even from just a single cell, Kexon and Kexin bodies could regenerate back to their former selves. However, it hurts like hell and leaves us with aches and pains all over our newly reborn bodies for at least a day. It also works for our clothes if we've invoked some of our powers into them. When my body came back, sitting on the ground, I looked over at the train as I scratched the top right side of my head with my right hand and said, "Son of a bitch, that hurts." I lowered my hand to adjust my glasses, then down as I looked around to try and find that dumbass Kexon that nearly killed Yojin and me. I looked over to my right to see him get into a parked car along the road in the distance and drive off casually, as if he were done with us and wanted nothing more than to leave. I didn't know what he was really after, but I guess it wasn't to kill either Yojin or me. Because if that was the case, he wouldn't have left in such a hurry. He was trying to find out something. Maybe he wanted to know if we really did side with the Sentinels against Father. But why would he have gone through such lengths to do so? Yojin quickly sat up and yelled, "Creator, damn it!" He then turned to me and yelled, "White boy, I should smack you." I laughed as I looked down at Rek'Har and grabbed it with my left hand to place it in my right, then placed it back into my inside left coat pocket. I continued to laugh as Yojin asked, "Oh, you think this is funny, punk?" He quickly punched me with his right fist into the left side of my face, breaking my glasses. I just continued to laugh as we stood up and brushed some of the dirt off of ourselves. Then we both fixed and adjusted our glasses. I looked up at the train as Yojin examined himself to make sure that his coat was still intact, though he didn't really need to. I could sense that the train was blown up by an energy blast after the nitrous tanks exploded, possibly to make sure that Yojin and I were completely destroyed. I stopped laughing to hear sirens going off all around us, most likely to come to the accident. I glanced back at the tanker far behind us on the street, then looked back at the train and said, "Huh, it was either the train or the tanker." Yojin looked back at the tanker, then back at the train and calmly said, "Not bad. Almost worked." With that, he quickly punched me in the left side of my face again with his right fist, slightly harder that time, and breaking my glasses again. He then barked, That was for hitting my car, white boy. I continued to lean slightly over to my right, fixing my glasses once more, then spat out some blood and bluntly said, "You're welcome." Yeah, with that, I thought, jackass. Yojin adjusted both his glasses and his coat, then said, "Thank you, my lord. I wouldn't be standing here if you didn't save me." As I straightened myself out, he turned to me and knelt down on his right knee while he placed his left arm onto his left knee, placed his right fist down on the ground. He then said, "I am forever in your debt." Okay, now get up before Serena notices you. As Yojin stood, I continued, "Otherwise, she and Wolf will never let you hear the end of it." "Yeah," he said as he turned back towards the crash. "Bitches." I called out to the others to let them know we were alright and for us to head back to the hotel before the cops showed up. We all went to bed, with Amber and Joel taking the second bedroom. I was in the first bedroom with Serena, Wolf, Bunny, and Kalita. It wasn't my decision. Yojin and Blight took my damn chair and desk. That's my spot. I slept in the center of the bed with Serena at my right side and Bunny at my left, while Wolf slept in her full animal form next to Kalita as they laid at the foot of the bed. As I fell into a deep sleep, Bunny whispered, "I'm glad you're back home, Papa. Pleasant dreams." Earth? Home? Maybe. Just maybe. This concludes the reading of Chapter 22. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, there will be a link to my physical works in the description below. With that being said, stay safe, take care, and we will see you again next week, reading Chapter 23.